So I am so thrilled today to be here with Jen Williams, SVP in customer experience
Mhm.
and an expert on really the treatment of employees to maximize customer experience. And I think, Jen, that's where you and I are really aligned.
Yeah,
We have this passion. So tell me where your passion for this was born.
probably I would say really when I worked at Rackspace is where I learned about the importance of playing to the team members' strengths. We were a big advocate of Clifton strengths, and so that's where I first learned about what it meant to play to somebody's strengths and how to coach and develop team members using their strengths. So that's probably where they had a great culture, and I really enjoyed learning so much about it.
And for those who don't aren't familiar with Clifton Strengths, can you explain a little bit more about Clifton Strengths and the benefits of it?
Yeah, you bet. So Gallup they have this Clifton Strengths survey that you do. And when you complete the survey, it gives you it lists 34 different strengths, right? And it's very unique to each individual. The likelihood of anybody having the same exact strengths is slim to none. But it helps you identify your top five strengths. So, like, for example, mine are achiever, strategic, learner, and responsibility and focus. So, that tells me for my top five strengths, if I were to go look at the Clifton Strengths workbook, it would tell me what I do well at in a job. And you'll notice they're not necessarily strengths that are what you're doing in your job. It's more about your personality, right? Kind of like a personality assessment. But what I really like about Gallup's Clifton Strengths is it also gives you not only what you're good at, and when you read the descriptions of those strengths, they're spot on. It
Mhm.
also gives you your blind spots. And so when you dial up some of those strengths too high, those blind spots can become a problem. And that's where you start to see people having problems with performance or behaviors. And oftentimes it's just learning how to bring those blind spots to their attention. And they're already going to want to change because they want to be successful for the most part, right?
Right, right. And this is really in alignment with something that I talk about in people risk management, and that's identity disclosure.
Right.
And it's kind of hard to disclose your identity as a performer when you really don't know it yourself.
Mhm.
And I remember the first time I did the Clifton Strengths for myself. And by the way, I'm also achiever and strategic. Those are two of mine too, which is why I had the big smile on my face. But it also told me some things about myself that I really wasn't aware of.
Yeah.
So I might know that I like to have more strategic discussions. I like to look at the 30,000 foot view before we drill down to the tactics.
Yeah.
But until there is some sort of metric in place, I might not know how to articulate that. So I love how these assessments can bring some unified language
Right.
to performance, which helps in that disclosure of identity. And here's what I'm really strong at, and here's kind of where I need help
Right.
as well.
Right.
So, what advice do you have for leaders who might come across not just Clifton Strengths, but any assessment? Myers-Briggs, even though there are questions about its validity
Right.
over time, any type of metric that might say this is who you are
Mhm.
identity-wise. What advice would you have?
Yeah, I think from a personality perspective, just the psychology of our personalities, there's not any one personality assessment that's going to accurately depict all of any person, right? I think it's a great way, like you said, for us to have a common language about what we're looking for, right? What we're playing, helping us to guide and have those development conversations with our team members in a way that's positively impacting them. The goal isn't one of the things I like about Clifton Strengths, there's not any bad strengths, right? No, you notice we're not talking about weaknesses, we're talking about strengths, right? There may be a strength that you're not as strong in, but that doesn't mean it's bad, right? And the whole idea is to identify your top strengths and surround yourself with people who have different strengths than you, right? Because then you can build a diverse team that has people thinking differently, and together as a team, you're operating at your highest, right?
Mhm. What happens when organizations don't choose a common language, a framework for disclosing strengths, weaknesses, identities? What happens to those teams?
I think it can cause a lot of confusion, right? Nobody's there, we're not speaking a common language. People don't know what to expect, and that's when people start to um, they start to think the worst, right? And so by having a common language, you're creating a shared unity, right? A sense of belonging in a team. You've got the shared vision, you've got the shared language. Now you're all marching towards the same drum.
Mhm. So shifting into from identity disclosure, and talking about instructional needs
Mhm.
with people, when there are gaps, when there are needs to grow, especially in customer experience and customer success.
Mhm.
What types of behaviors have you seen when employees are kind of clamming up and not using their voice about their instructional needs, and what can leaders do to help employees speak up?
Yeah, I think you see people start to disconnect, right? You start to see them not asking questions, not talking. They become almost shut down, right? And as a leader, even in a remote setting, when you're talking over video, you can see the difference in their face. You can see them start to build that wall around themselves. And as a leader, what you want to do is ask those deeper questions, right? Maybe take the conversation to the side. And if you're in a team meeting, you want to have that as a one-on-one conversation and ask them, right? What's going on? I notice the visible body changes, the body language changes. You're not interacting as much, and ask them point blank why, right? What can I do to help? And show that you care about them as an individual.
So if the conversation is around I don't know what to do or instructional needs, how do you get an employee to admit that?
I think you ask point blank, right? Do you understand the expectations?
Mhm.
Is there anything that I can do to help make them more clear? Do you have the skills necessary to do the job, right?
Mhm.
And you can see that as a leader if they have the skills necessary. But it's our job to make sure we're having those frequent one-on-ones and building a relationship with an employee so they feel comfortable and they feel psychologically safe to have those conversations. Now, obviously, there's some things that employees aren't going to want to talk about that are personal, and that's totally fine. You're not going to force that, but it's building a culture where your team feels safe coming to you, that they're not going to be chastised by bringing up a concern to your attention.
What do you see out there as some ways that great leaders around you have built those psychologically safe spaces?
Yeah, I think it's being human, right? It's being human, showing that you're just as human as they are, admitting your faults, admitting your mistakes, building an environment where it's safe to fail, right? People learn from failure. And so admitting those mistakes, telling stories about your past and your experience and how you got to where you are, I think that all adds to creating that psychologically safe environment.
So, specifically speaking about customer experience and customer success, how can a breakdown in these things within the organization impact the customer?
Oh, huge, right? If the team isn't engaged, they don't have the desire necessarily to help that customer. They're not bringing their best to the customer every day, right? Helping them feel fully supported, understanding what they need to do, teaching them the principles of customer success. All of that's important to help properly guide a customer to achieving their own success in their experience with the company. Um, and so, yeah, I think I can't state enough how important it is to build that safe environment, right? When you notice when people don't feel secure in their job, in their environment, they start to shut down, they start to get quiet and withdraw. And you can tell that something's not right. And it starts from the very first experience, the interview, right? Is setting that ground and that stage for this is the type of culture we have. We have an open door culture where we encourage you to speak up. We want you to be an active member of the team, right? All of that is important when it comes to creating a psychologically safe space.
So, do you have any stories about how this has impacted the customer line, both in a positive way and the safety wasn't there in a negative way?
Sure, sure. So oftentimes when you're working as a leader, right? I'm a big believer that the frontline team members are the closest to the customer and they can add the biggest impact, right? They understand the customer pain points better than anybody else in the company. And so I, in the past, have had situations where I'm working on improving the customer experience. And so one of the things I like to do is poll my team once a quarter, once every 6 months, ask the team, what are we doing well? What do we need to stop doing? What do we need to start doing to help improve the customer experience, right? And then obtain that feedback directly from my team members, the frontline team members, and parse through it, right? Go through that data, identify trends. They're going to tell you, they're going to be upfront and honest. And I do it in an anonymous way so they feel safe, right? That they don't need to be called out. They don't feel like they're going to get in trouble for saying something. And then what you do as a leader with that information is what makes or breaks the feedback, right? You've got to close the loop. If you don't make any changes with the feedback, then it's invaluable, right? They're not going to continue to open up. But when you can take that feedback, share the trends with them, share what you're doing as a leader to improve things either for their working environment or for the customer, right? Then it shows that you care as an individual and you have a high say-do ratio.
And how about when it's not flowing as
Yeah.
well? What have you seen on in terms of customer impacts when it's not psychologically safe within the team?
Sad. It's really sad because when it's not psychologically safe, the team just comes in and does the job. They don't have the passion for the customer. They don't care if the customer's upset. They don't care if they give a bad service experience, right? They're doing the bare minimum in their job and going home. And that's not something you want to create. You want to create an environment where the team wants to come work for you. They want to provide that customer with the best service possible because they understand the vision and they're excited about it, right?
What do you feel are the essential traits for a leader who is SVP, like as you were in customer experience, customer success?
There's so many traits that you can have. I would say definitely you need to be empathetic, not only for the customer, but for your team members. You've got to be strategic and able to solve problems at the drop of a hat, right? Be able to be a creative problem solver. It's important to understand data and make data-driven decisions. So you're not just running an organization through gut feelings. Um, all of that's important. But then I think number one is building that team engagement and building a team that wants to come to work and wants to provide that customer with an amazing experience. And that in itself is what's going to create a high performing team.
What kind of people data should customer success, customer experience, chief customer officers be really interested in for a high performing team?
So attendance, right? That's going to tell you, are people burnt out and not coming into work? Time off. Are people not taking time off and burning out? You want to encourage time off, especially when you're in a customer facing environment, right? The morale of the team is so important. And those two things right there, the time off and attendance, are the two big factors that'll start to show you that there's problems with morale. And then doing engagement surveys, right? Just asking the team through surveys that how they're doing, right? Gallup also has an engagement survey that they do that has 12 questions that they ask.
Mhm.
You can use those questions and ask your team and figure out what's going on and where you need to go to improve their experience.
Absolutely. When we assess employee environments, we use the Gallup Q12. We use Dr. Amy Edmondson's metrics for psychological safety, those 7 questions. But we also look at customized questions, especially, CX especially is very risk attuned, I find, because you have churn risk mitigation to consider. You have the risk of less revenue, less ARR, less MRR from existing customers, and you have to look at that risk. And I imagine if you did a correlation, you might find that your employee satisfaction, your employee engagement has a direct correlation to those customer risk management outcomes. What do you think?
I would agree with you 100%.
What evidence have you seen of that potential correlation?
There was a point when I was at Rackspace that we did see high churn numbers or an increase in churn numbers. It wasn't excessively high, but it was higher than the average. And when we did an employee engagement survey, we did find there was problems with engagement, and that's how we fixed it, right? Doubling down to improve the employee experience, doubling down to improve the customer experience, allowing the team members to have a voice. And that's really what turned things around.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I've seen it from personal experience that those questions do make a difference and they work.
And that voice really does also impact innovation within the organization and the ability for employees to bring ideas forward for the
Yep.
organization. That's another, kind of behavior of silencing or non-disclosure that happens, is that there's an idea risk. What differences do you see between employees who are encouraged to share their ideas and employees that are encouraged to follow the manual?
I would say when you're encouraged to follow the manual, you lack that innovation, you lack the ability to drive change. And it impacts, again, they start to get bored, tired. You don't see that same sense of spark, the creativity that they bring, the excitement to come to work and make a difference, not only for their customer, but also for the company, right? People want to feel like they're part of an inspired mission. And that's part of being inspiring, is having the opportunity to drive change and giving them a voice and an outlet to give feedback.
Yeah, and finally, the fourth quadrant of our ID framework is incident disclosure. Now, in CX, this would be something that happens with the customer,
Yes.
between the representative and the customer. How often do you see those type of incidents covered up?
I try not to see, I hope that I don't see anything being covered up. I
Okay.
really try to stress to the team it's important to share those details because we can learn from it, right? If something goes wrong, I want to know about it so that I can help you get better at it. Like I said, people get better by making mistakes, right? So let me know what the mistake is and how we fix it. What did you do? What would you have done differently? How can we go about fixing it so that it doesn't happen in the future, right? I have seen situations where people will cover things up if they don't feel safe, if they feel like making a mistake is going to impact their ability to stay in the job, right? Then yes, for sure. When you've got somebody with a performance concern, they may be apt to cover it up and you have to dig in deeper. But on the whole, if you have a high performing team, people are open and honest about the issues that they're feeling and experiencing.
And that's really what I was getting at, is that when you set up these structures of psychological safety, of openness and disclosing, who you are, what you need from a training or instructional standpoint, and when there's an idea that comes up, that it's okay to voice it and encouraged to voice it, those incidents also become easier to talk about without shame. And shame and embarrassment are the two big reasons why employees won't talk about an incident. And organizations tend to focus on physical safety, on ergonomics, on things that are more physical, and but the other side of it is when something goes on with your customer, how open is that employee to go, my bad?
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
might have talked to him a little sharp. I got a little stressed.
Yeah.
That
All the
it's
time,
not a
all the
low
time in customer
stress
success. Yeah.
role. I mean, if you look at the role of most CSMs
Mhm.
or most support people,
Yeah.
they are dealing with someone at their most stressed with your
That's
product.
right. That's
And
right.
at the same time, they have a mandate to expand existing revenue from those existing customers.
Right.
So it's this tightrope that they walk.
Yeah.
And when an incident does happen, which, sometimes the customer walks in the door with the incident, here's the incident, help
Right.
me with it, right?
Yep.
So if they can help, that's a win. But if they can't help, that process of escalation as well. And it's incredibly important to develop these environments of psychological safety within the team so that escalations happen in a timely manner. And they also happen in a manner that's not also too immediate, that
Right.
that confidence is built up. So
Right.
what are your thoughts on that?
I also think it's important as a company that we're transparent, right? If there's an escalation going on or there's something going on that's impacting the customer, we need to be transparent about what's going on and what we're doing to fix it so that in turn our teams can be transparent to the customers. So many times I find when you just tell the customer what is going on and help them understand what we're doing to fix it, they're fine, right? But it's that lack of transparency that makes it difficult, not only for our team members, but also for the customers, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And transparency is one of those key indicators of psychological safety, the ability to be transparent, but also have had transparency imparted down the line. And that's where psychological safety becomes the job of the chief customer officer, all the way down to that support person, and creating that environment and that culture. So you can have this desire in the department to
Yeah.
have a psychological safety, but there could be a layer outside that feels like there's an interpersonal risk to transparency, to talking about the need for this escalation and waiting too long because I don't want to look bad or what have you. So it becomes this organizational effort, data driven,
Yeah.
because you don't know actually until you have that data what the real deal situation is within the
Right.
company in terms of psychological safety, satisfaction, the environments that set up this wonderful space where disclosure can just flow. And so I love that you've shared with me today how you create environments of psychological safety, and how you assess employees, how you encourage employees to use their voices. You have anything else to add?
No, I think this was a great conversation. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me.
Thank you so much, Jen. It's been amazing talking to you, and you have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah.